Good day, University City, and welcome to UC Talks, a hyper-local podcast that features conversations, interviews, and news of importance to University City. My name is Jemma Samala, and I'm the editor of the University City Community Association's newsletter. This podcast is made possible to you, it's brought to you by the University City Community Association and made possible through a grant from the County of San Diego. Today, we are talking to San Diego City Attorney Mara Elliott, who oversees a pretty large office of attorneys. It's like a firm, and attorneys and support staff. And before we get into everything, Mara, why don't you explain, your role as a city attorney, how the city attorney's office is run? And I'm also kind of curious, with social distancing rules in place, is everybody pretty much working at home now?
Yeah, we have about 95% of our staff working from home. We have nearly 400 members of the city attorney's office. We have almost 170 attorneys, and the rest are support staff, paralegals, investigators, secretaries, the folks that help us get our work done on a day-to-day level. And it is a rather complicated office. We have very much appreciated having some coverage from University City and its news outlet. So how to begin to explain our very diverse role. The city attorney is the prosecutor of infractions and misdemeanors for the city of San Diego.
Oh, okay.
And that is just the region of the city of San Diego. The district attorney prosecutes felonies, and she also prosecutes misdemeanors. But she does that largely for the county.
Okay.
And then some cities as well. So we share that jurisdiction. We do not prosecute felonies.
Okay.
So the way I equate it is we do a lot of things like the stuff that drives you nuts in your neighborhood. It could be vandalism, or hoarding, or you might notice that there's code violations in your neighborhood. That's the kind of work that we do, and that's really important. And that's a distinguishing feature between us and the district attorney. That's not the kind of work they do. I mean, their work is equally important, but we're very neighborhood oriented. And then we also do other criminal prosecutions, domestic violence, child abuse, battery, driving under the influence of drugs or alcohol. So they're all really important. Our neighborhood prosecutors work directly with our community. In fact, we're often hearing from neighbors about the things that they want to see addressed within their own neighborhoods. So our office is probably a little over 50% with the prosecution angle. And what I also love about what they do is we have a lot of folks that are committing these low-level crimes who frankly have fallen into the system because something has happened. Maybe they become addicted to drugs, and because they're feeding a drug habit, they're not now starting to steal. So we create programs that help these individuals get out of the criminal justice system. And not only is it the right thing to do, but it saves money too, because otherwise we end up prosecuting the same individuals over and over again.
Right.
So that is, when I am the criminal prosecutor for the city, I'm working on behalf of the people of the state of California. And in that capacity, I'm not going to the council or the mayor and saying, hey, what do you want to do with this case? Our role is very separate, which is important because we want to ensure justice. We want to look at that case on its own merits and act responsibly without political pressure. The other role that I have is I am the attorney for the mayor and for the city council. And all of the departments that are within the city structure. There are about a little over 11,000 people who work at the city. So it's like being in-house counsel, dealing with anything that could impact a city. It could be contract disputes. We go to the council meetings and to committee meetings, and we guide them on open meeting laws or conflict of interest, or we help them from the dais to determine what they can or cannot do when it comes to decision making. We're involved with development agreements. So if something is being built in the city of San Diego, we will be involved ensuring that the developer and the city are all following the rules. We have a fully staffed litigation department, and they civilly prosecute and civilly defend the city. So we have employees that are using cars, and they'll have fender benders like others do. We have excessive force cases, inverse condemnation cases. So if a city pipe explodes and causes damage, we're going to be defending that action on behalf of the city. Employment disputes, just like any other law firm would be dealing with.
Right.
And we get about a little over 200 cases, brand new cases, every year that are handled by our civil litigators. And I mentioned that they not only defend, but they also civilly prosecute. So by that, I mean, if we put a contract out on the streets and somebody bids on it, and they are to create a building for us, and that building starts to crumble, we're going to sue them. So we will be the plaintiff that is going after that contractor in order to ensure that the taxpayer dollars are protected. So the role that I have is extremely diverse, and there are not a lot of elected city attorneys in the state of California. The larger cities tend to go with an elected city attorney, and the reason is the independence that is associated with that election. A person who is elected is accountable to the public, and the public will evaluate my performance every 4 years, and I can serve for up to 8 years. And if they decide that they don't like the work I'm doing, they want to take the city in a different direction, they have the opportunity to elect another city attorney. If I were appointed, it's a very different structure because you are reporting to the council and to the mayor. They would hire you and they would fire you. But as an independent elected city attorney, I can make decisions for the public that are very difficult decisions and highly scrutinized decisions. And that independence is extremely important to protect the public's interests. So it is a very complex role.
And so I guess that's an easy way to differentiate your office as compared to the DA's office, is like the felonies kind of, idea. And so, and I didn't realize that you guys can create your own programs also. So what are some of the programs that your office has created to help, some of those, like you said, that may have kind of gotten into a bad track?
We have something called the San Diego Misdemeanors at Risk Track program. And that program was responsive to a high incident of repeat offenders who we felt needed a helping hand, that they could change their way and return to society as productive members if given an opportunity. And individuals like that, we don't want to help them progress to District Attorney Summer Stephan's office. We'd rather help them exit the system. So we created a program where if the right candidates are that we're convinced that the right candidates want to step forward, take advantage of services, and clean up their act. They might have a drug issue, and that's typically who we're dealing with, and return to society, that we will essentially wipe their record clean. And that is our goal. We want to make sure that they don't have that record, that they can emerge in society again. They're no longer on drugs. They want to hold a job. They want to get out of that situation that they had found themselves in. But our conditions are steep, so we will monitor them in our office and ensure that they complete that program. So they're going to have to take the services, but they also need to take a bed. And a lot of these individuals have become homeless because of their addiction, and that's how they got into our criminal justice system, not because they're homeless, but because they have committed a crime. So we want to remove them from that situation where they found themselves committing crimes, and put them either in an independent living facility. We'll rent rooms out of safe premises to house them at, or we just purchased a hotel that was in terrible condition. It was being used for drugs and prostitution, and not used for tourism. The city used grant funds, purchased this hotel. It is just about ready to start housing these people who really want to get back on their feet.
So this is a new thing then, this hotel that's been purchased.
Correct. Yes. We had been in litigation. We have been successful. We're getting ready to open it up. And I get to go to the graduation of the people who succeed in this program, and it makes my job absolutely worth going to work for every day, because you have a real impact on people's lives, people who were so desperate to have someone believe in them again and give them an opportunity. And we just had a ceremony right before the pandemic hit in our office to congratulate the most recent group of graduates. And it was so touching. One of them said, nobody cared if I lived or died. I didn't have any family. I feel like the city attorney's office is my family.
Yeah.
Because finally somebody said, we believe in you. Let's get you out of the system. Let us help you. And it is absolutely heartwarming. But I think the public needs to know that their money is well spent, because individuals like that probably would have circled through our system many, many times. And you end up using the court's resources. We use our own to prosecute them. You can be using the jail resources, often the hospitals. And there's a whole bunch of entities that are investing in the wrong way in people that can be saved. We're not going to save everybody, but I believe in trying programs that have the opportunity for success, especially if we really are reaching people and changing their lives.
And I would think, like, right now also, does that incorporate the programs that they're having in place now because of the COVID crisis, is getting the homeless people off the streets, and I think they're being housed at the convention center and other places. Is that kind of part of that too, you think, in the future at least?
I think that there's a lot of similarities in the programs. I think ours is very targeted to help people succeed and kick a habit that has likely vexed them for decades. Mm-hmm. We have some people that's just how they have spent their lives. Yeah. I think the convention center is very different in that it's an emergency. We need to remove these people from very unsafe circumstances and put them in an area where they can access services, and we can remove them from the streets and from congregating close together. Yeah. So I don't believe anybody sees the convention center as a fix-all, but it is a temporary solution to make sure we can keep as many people as possible safe.
Mm-hmm. Right. So let's kind of, since we're touched on the COVID crisis a little bit, I'm sure your office has been really busy as far as dealing with that. So by the way, so is everyone pretty much virtual, or are you guys keeping our cubicles or whatever 6 feet apart, or how are you guys in the office?
My preference is to do work virtually, and mm-hmm. we have about 95% of our staff able to do virtual work. And sometimes folks have to come in. For instance, our criminal division, the attorneys are still going to court. So we work with the presiding judge to ensure that we're able to get in on cases that are really important to public health and safety, domestic violence, for instance. That's not stopped. We continue to get gun violence restraining orders. Okay. So the attorneys have to physically come in for a lot of their work, but we're able to do it in segments. So maybe we'll have 15 trial attorneys come in, and then another 15 are going to come in the next day. So we try to break it up, but we're closely monitoring it because we want to keep our staff safe.
Right. And so is that, so are the courts open? The courts are open then, at least virtually, or do they actually come in, or what happens there?
It is actually virtually, and it is very limited access because the court has its own, they have a very large staff, and they have to protect their staff as well. I think we've long dreamed and talked about appearing virtually, and I think if anything positive comes out of this pandemic, it's the realization that you can achieve access to justice remotely. And we're very fortunate in San Diego because the courts work so closely with the defense bar and with the prosecution. So we meet at least once a week with the presiding judge and her assistant presiding judge, public defender, the district attorney, and then my office, as well as Sheriff Gore when he's able to, and when he's part of that conversation, if we're talking about jails, to ensure we're all marching to the same beat and ensuring that people can see a judge as quickly as possible. And if they're in the jails, that they are safe. Right. So there's a lot of orchestration behind the scene that the public may not quite understand. Or appreciate, because it's not something they would think about, but it's really complicated.
Yeah. And so talking about the COVID crisis again, what are the situations that you guys are dealing with now?
There are so many layers of it. Mm-hmm. So we already touched on it. How do you change a government agency? Because we're very used to being available to the public at windows or picking up the phone at certain times. how do you overnight convert a government agency into a virtual operation?
Mhm.
And with that came a lot of employment issues. So we had to make sure people had access to equipment so they could work from home.
Mhm.
And at the same time, leaves were being defined by the state and by the federal government. So when can you take a leave that's related to this pandemic?
Mhm.
If you have to take care of your children, because many of us are now homeschooling, how are you going to be able to do that? Or if one of your family members gets infected with the virus and you become a caretaker, do you have access to leave? So my team was involved in trying to help the city understand what all these various leaves were and how they could be used, and then communicating that information to our labor unions within the city to make sure that they are able to share that information with their folks. So it's very complicated and layered. So we had to learn very fast and be extremely accessible to our client. So there's that labor aspect. The budget has been severely hit. Of course, the city has, every city has, every state is. We're all feeling it. The city largely relies on transit occupancy tax, which you receive because you have tourists who are coming and staying in our hotel.
Which is like
hotels here in San
none
Diego
right now. Yes.
And they're closed largely. So there goes a huge amount of money that we were expecting to come in, and we're getting ready to go into the budget cycle on Thursday with budget committee meetings. We also rely on sales tax. People are not going out to shop. We're staying at home, and I think most of us are doing what I'm doing, which is I go to the market once a week.
Right.
With my very long list, so I don't have to go back any more than once a week.
Me too. Yeah.
So those revenues have dropped off. We have to try to figure out, how do you run government with less money? What are our core services as a city that the public expects us to provide? And what is extra that we're going to have to taper back on? And how does this impact our services? And how does this impact our employees? The mayor has issued some emergency orders that impact when you can use our beaches or walk in our parks, or when you're going to use a mask. And he had to close city buildings to public access. So we had to help with those emergency orders. And we have a system where we've got the council working with our mayor, and the mayor can't just declare that. The mayor had to bring his request to the city council. And whenever our council meets, any legislative body meets, they must follow our state's transparency laws.
Right.
So we had to figure out, how do you have a meeting and give the public access when you can't allow the public to enter into your buildings? So we all discovered Zoom, and we all discovered that sometimes Zoom has some problems if you're not careful. So we're all learning.
Yes, I heard about those.
We've been lucky we have not had. So it's the things you don't think about, because the public wants to comment. If we have an item before the council that the council is going to vote on, it's an absolute right of the public to have their moment to speak on it. So we had to ensure that they had that moment by telephone or appearing virtually, or we had a lot of options. But what was so interesting is the governor weighed in and said, okay, municipalities, this is how you're going to conduct your meetings to ensure access to people and also the disabled. Because it might be very difficult for folks to have access to computers. We're fortunate. So how do we make sure people have that? So it's issues like that. And then with my prosecutor's hat, we were watching to see if there would be an increase in domestic violence or child abuse, or the need for gun violence restraining orders. And a lot of, now we have people who are not used to being home together all the time because we're sheltering in place. The children are not used to being with us 24 hours a day. Children are observing things they may never have seen before. Tensions are building. People are losing jobs or getting ill. And the tension will rise in a house. And if you are being abused, it may be very difficult to escape your abuser long enough to make a phone call and cry out for help.
Because don't a lot of those, especially like child abuse cases, are reported by teachers?
You got it.
And if they're not able to see their students on a daily basis, they're not able to see what's going on.
You're absolutely right. And so the initial numbers are showing a dip. And
So, which is not necessarily good, right?
I'm skeptical of that dip for the reasons I described, because we don't have that extra set of eyes. I read this morning in the paper that the hospitals are seeing a drop off in visits because people don't want to leave their home and they don't want to be touched. So that's another line of reporting where your doctor has an obligation to report abuse,
Right.
and isn't necessarily seeing it. So we're missing all these levels of oversight that are so important for protecting victims. What I didn't mention to you when I was describing the work we do is I also oversee the Family Justice Center, which is in the heart of downtown San Diego.
Right.
And it provides comprehensive services to victims of domestic violence, sexual assault, and human trafficking. The services are free and they're private. When the city buildings closed, we closed our physical location, but we want people to know that we are open. We continue to operate. We're just doing it virtually.
Okay.
And
so if someone needs those services, what do they do, or who do they call?
they can call the Family Justice Center directly.
Okay.
And I don't have that phone number memorized, but there's also a website. And somebody will pick up that call and listen to your story and help you safety plan. And safety plans are essential for victims. It is, if something happens and I need to get out of here really fast, what am I going to do? So we encourage people who are being abused to be ready. It's an escape plan, and we are trained to help someone form those plans. And we are available even during the pandemic to anybody. We don't limit our services to only the city of San Diego. In fact, about a third of the folks who come to us are from outside of the city of San Diego.
Okay.
Yep. And we can speak many languages. We have access to interpreters, so nobody should be concerned that we won't be able to understand. We will find a way to understand, and we will find a way to help. And we provide forensic exams for those who have been raped. We provide psychological services, legal services. We have partners who will help get a restraining order or help with a family law or immigration matter. So we can't do it alone. I have a small but mighty staff of 7, and we rely very greatly on our partners who will also step in to provide the comprehensive services that a victim needs to become a survivor.
And the courts are, like you said, are still open, so they can get a TRO right away if they are
exactly.
Life. Yeah.
Yep. We're fortunate that the presiding judge recognizes the importance of restraining orders, especially for victims of domestic violence or gun violence, and has continued to ensure that we're able to get those restraining orders without missing a beat.
Now, you said gun violence real quick. So did you, or do you notice an uptick of gun sales by any chance? I don't know if you're monitoring that, but I'm just kind of curious.
Yes, I have, because the newspapers have been reporting on an uptick in the sales of guns. And the way they describe it is that some folks feel that they need to have that extra sense of security during a pandemic, which is fine. Our office does not have a position about whether somebody wants to have a gun. What we do have a position about is whether the person who has a gun is responsible. And if an individual has access to a gun, and whether it's their own or they just have access, and they are a danger to themselves or to others, my office will assist in getting what's called a gun violence restraining order. And that allows us to remove that gun from that dangerous person. And they can eventually get their gun back once they've remedied whatever it was that caused them to become dangerous. And we've achieved hundreds of these at this point. We started this program back in 2017. The law was passed here in the state of California in 2016. So it's been a very successful program. So if somebody has a concern, call the police department. They do an investigation. If they echo the concern, they refer the case to our office, and we'll go out and get that restraining order and remove the gun from the individual.
That's good. Yeah, I just kind of worry about that, because with more kids at home too, and if there's more guns in homes and kids happen to find these, who knows if new gun owners know how to take care of these weapons and how to lock them away safely. Right? Yeah.
I'm so glad you brought that up, because it's a good reminder. We have kids in our homes now.
Right.
And there are a lot of guns in homes here in San Diego. we have a safe storage of firearms ordinance that was passed by the city council that I spearheaded last year. It's really important. I've got 2 kids at home myself.
Yeah.
And we had a tragedy occur in my community where a 10-year-old found an unsecured gun and killed himself on accident. And I cannot imagine what it was like for those children who were his classmates that returned to school and saw that empty chair and had all those questions.
Mhm.
So it was really important to me to make sure people knew they have an obligation to lock their gun up, and they do it.
Right.
So that is another reminder, is you can go onto the State Attorney General's website if you have a gun, and there are many, like hundreds of options available to safely secure your firearm, because children are very savvy.
Mhm.
And our statistics show that we don't think they know where we are keeping our guns, but they do. They do know where you're keeping your gun.
Yeah, kids are
and they're
smarter than what we think.
They are. They're sophisticated. They're curious, and they get bored. You know,
Right,
when
right.
the day ends, what are they going to do?
Right.
So,
Especially now, you know.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So there are many options available. We partnered with San Diego Unified School District. They informed all of the families within their district of the requirement to abide by this law and lock up your guns.
Uh-huh.
And now we're working with other school districts, because we want to make sure people are thinking about this. We've got a lot on our minds right now. Don't let this slip by.
Yeah. I want to talk about something else. I know, because I've seen some of this going on too, is whenever there's a crisis like this, you have people that are trying to prey on other people.
Yes.
With the price gouging and these, test scams or scams on how to protect yourself and everything. So what kind of cases have come up about that? Because
we have an affirmative civil enforcement division within our office. It's the civil arm of enforcement.
Okay.
And they protect consumers. That unit was inundated with complaints about the suspicion that price gouging was going on, which means that if, let's say we have a roll of toilet paper and it's normally 25 cents and suddenly it's being sold for $1 after the pandemic has been declared.
Mm-hmm.
That could be price gouging. We have to look into the circumstances that caused that price to rise. But when there is a public emergency in the state of California and that price gets increased after that emergency is declared by more than 10%, you potentially have price gouging.
Mm-hmm.
And we were seeing that with many of the essentials that people were looking for, that there was suddenly an increase in prices. Mm-hmm. I was hearing from folks that couldn't buy baby wipes or diapers. They were just too expensive. Yeah. My neighbor's still waiting on his Amazon order of toilet paper. So there is definitely, there will always be somebody who's going to try to capitalize on that, but it is not legal. Mm-hmm. So our office will investigate, and if we are able to confirm that there indeed is price gouging, we will prosecute. Mm-hmm. And we also have a criminal division. They will look for criminal related crimes, and there could be repercussions that are greater than your typical price gouging. Okay. So I have 2 divisions.
Like what? What would those examples be as far as a criminal activity?
Well, it's very similar. So they actually can look at the price gouging too. I could have 2 completely different enforcement actions going on in the office relating to one sale. Uh-huh. So the civil folks will take it more the civil avenue, and then the criminal will exercise the criminal laws.
Okay. All right.
Yeah. So what I'm saying is that we try to make sure that we don't leave any stones unturned when it comes to taking advantage of folks who are scared. Mm-hmm. And trying to buy essential items. Mm-hmm. The other thing we're keeping an eye on is alleged miracle cures for COVID. Mm-hmm. We're seeing that a lot. We're working with the district attorney and with the U.S. Attorney General, as well as the state. We all are watching this. So depending on the severity of the crime, one of us can take it. If we need to. These pop-up clinics, we're going to watch to see if that is truthful or not, and we will shut them down if that is not true.
Okay.
So it's anything that just doesn't feel right. We have a consumer fraud unit in our office, and we will investigate to make sure consumers are being treated fairly.
Okay. And one thing, in University City in particular, we do have quite a bit of a senior community. And so are there scams that are targeted towards our seniors?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
And we're seeing an uptick in that too. In fact, my mother just got a phone call the other day, allegedly from my son, asking for a bailout. So we hear about a lot of those, but some of the indicators might be it's a private phone call that's coming in, or they're unable to identify family members with any specificity. There's an immediate ask for money. There's an allegation of being in danger. We hear about certain tax authorities or the Social Security Administration calling and saying, you need to send this money. I need your credit card. That is not how these organizations operate. Typically, you're going to get a letter. So just be on guard. And also, I would encourage people, if they are suspicious, say, I'm going to call you back. Where can I call you back?
Oh, that's a good
Make sure you're calling the agency, because if Social Security is not picking up, you know that this is somebody who's scamming you. But we also want to hear about the latest scams. That can be reported to my office. That can be reported to the Federal Trade Commission, the district attorney. Just call any of us and we will route that complaint to the appropriate agency so that we can do something about it.
Right. And I have seen where the IRS scams, you could actually go to the IRS.gov website and
that's correct.
And report that too. Because
Yes.
I've had those calls.
Yeah, me too.
It's like, no, that's not true. Okay, well, that's good to know that just call somebody, you know, call your office, call someone if something like this happens.
Absolutely. Even the police department.
Right. Okay, that's good too. And so the other thing I want to talk about, I think we've got a lot of that covered. The gun safety, and so, the one thing too is about protecting kids online. And so all these kids are home, and who knows what's coming in or what's going out or whatever. You know, how does your office help protect our kids at home?
What we try to do is education, because some of these internet crimes are going to be bigger than misdemeanors, and that is the maximum my office will address. We can certainly attack some of these issues as consumer fraud. When it comes to child safety, that's been a platform of mine since I was elected. I'm the first mom to hold this office, first woman as city attorney, and it certainly does influence the things that I think are important. And I hear from the community that they're worried about safeguarding their kids. With kids working from home and parents distracted because we're still trying to hold down our own jobs, and then sneaking out when we can to make sure that they are following their virtual agendas that the schools are setting forward. It's very easy for kids to get roped into a friend request that may not be appropriate. So we encourage the parents to really stay tuned to what their children are watching online. Hop in, ask who they're talking to. We have privacy settings on our children's computers so that we can try to monitor. My kids tend to play games with people I've never heard of. Right. And I'll ask questions about who they're playing with. And I've explained to them, you don't want to overly alarm your children, of course, but I've given examples about, I just read in the paper, and we'll have a dinner conversation. I just read about this guy in the paper who was pretending to be a 12-year-old girl, but he was a 44-year-old truck driver. And my kids just don't think like that. Right, and I think most of our children don't. But right now, it's really a time for us to take advantage of being home together to just oversee our kids, have conversations with them, talk about what is and is not appropriate. Children can be very cautious about telling their parents about what they are seeing because they don't want to get in trouble. Right. Or they're ashamed. And I think those dinner conversations are really important, where you can open up the dialogue and say, and give examples. I just read about this, and it might open up the conversation. But just again, staying very in tune with what kids are seeing online. And there's also the other thing I'm observing with my children is their play dates are occurring like we're doing right now, virtually. So it's pretty easy to check in and see they're lonely. I know they miss their friends. So it could be very tempting to make new friends that they cannot identify. So just be really careful about keeping an eye on them. Yeah. What do you say to the parents that have kids that are in high school and maybe the kids they have their driver's license and they're able to leave home and not under the purview of the parents all the time? How do we protect those kids? I think that is why I wish I had some wiser advice. I've got a child who's right on the verge of driving,
Hmm.
and I try to talk to him in a way that um, is not accusatory. He's at that age where he knows everything,
Right.
and I try to frame it as this happens. I know you're smart. I trust you, but it's very easy to fall victim to this. One of our big points of contention right now is skateboarding. Doesn't want to wear a helmet.
Hmm.
Nobody ever falls if they're good. So I try to talk to him about this has happened. This happened to our
Yeah.
neighbor. They ended up in the emergency room with a
Yeah.
broken
Yeah.
wrist. So I try to relate to them the things that I've observed so that they know it's normal, and it doesn't mean that they're not good at this or good at that or not trustworthy. And we'll see, I'll keep you posted on how we do.
Yeah.
When it comes to the age of coronavirus, we watch news together at night, so I know that the children are well aware how dangerous this can
Yeah.
be.
Yeah.
And I try to keep it to a rule of three when I can, because it seems to be able to digest that.
Uh-huh.
6 feet, wearing a mask, not touching one another, just kind of obvious things that I think they can follow the directions on.
Oh, that's good. That's good. Yeah, because I remember back high school was when you wanted to be your most social.
Yeah,
And I know it must be tough for a lot of the high school kids right now because that's, high schools is where they meet all their friends and everything. So, and it is hard for them to listen, I think, because they feel that they're invincible right now.
absolutely.
Of course, I'm talking about some of my own sons too. So
Yeah, no, I think it's
I have
very
a 20
common.
and a 23-year-old, so I think they kind of think that they're, oh, this isn't going to happen to us, so we're
Of
fine.
course not. We were
Yeah,
all there at one point.
yeah. One
Yeah.
thing you touched upon briefly also, and I know your office has done some work on this, and I don't think, here in San Diego, I think we kind of feel, and especially here in University City, we don't realize this is kind of going on. So you touched briefly about sex trafficking, and
Mhm.
and I think I'm not sure if I'm mistaken or not, but do they get a lot of their kids from online programs, or how does that happen? What do we look for?
I can only speak to what I have observed and heard about in San Diego.
Hmm.
What we are most concerned about are the children who don't have supervision.
Hmm.
Um, and that is because of the course of life. Some parents are working during the night, they have night shifts. They're not able to be there to support their kids when their kids are doing homework,
Hmm.
perhaps because they have a low paying job and they're working at abnormal hours. A lot of single parent homes, homes where there are underlying issues, there's already some domestic violence or drug abuse going on.
Hmm.
And children want to be loved, they want to be appreciated.
Hmm.
And those are the most vulnerable kids, the ones that are looking for someone who is, they're making up for what they're not getting in
Okay.
terms of attention or love. And we see this, like ninth grade is one of those ages where kids are especially susceptible.
Oh, wow.
um, and if you are a child who is, I mean, it's already tough enough to be a child who's growing up.
Hmm.
Everything's changing. The way you see the world is changing. And then suddenly someone's telling you, you're beautiful. I just bought you this amazing purse because I love you.
Hmm.
And then you're being asked to do a favor. And then before long, you have slipped into being trafficked for this person who tells you how much they love you, and you're doing it for someone you love.
Hmm.
And it's very easy for this to catch kids, boys and girls.
Hmm.
And the folks that pull them into the industry know when they are vulnerable and when they are weak.
Hmm.
One of the things we try to do in the office, because we don't prosecute trafficking, because we don't prosecute felonies, is we do a lot of outreach to the schools. I started my career as a school law teacher or a school law attorney,
Oh, okay.
and it just gives you some insight about how kids think and the impact you can have when you reach kids when they're young.
Hmm.
And I'll just give you an example. If you're growing up and all you've ever observed in a relationship between parents is domestic violence, that's what is normal to you.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So when these kids are coming to school, their idea of normal could be very different from your idea or my idea of normal. So when we can get into the schools and we can talk about what a healthy relationship looks like,
Mm-hmm.
that can cause the child to say, wait a minute, I don't know what's going on with my relationship, and maybe ask the right person for help.
Right.
And then we run the Family Justice Center too, so we can be helpful there.
Yeah. And it's not, and the child doesn't have to be a runaway to have to
No.
be sex trafficked, right? I mean, they could still be living at home and have this going on.
Absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
It is absolutely fascinating. It's not something I remember observing when I was young,
Mm-hmm.
but the people who run this industry are very savvy, and they're making a lot of money off of our children.
Mm-hmm.
So they've learned the tricks of the trade. The other thing that's interesting at the city is that we have positions of trust, and kids will talk to these people. That's why it's very important for them to be trained to recognize trafficking.
Mm-hmm.
Librarians are very trusted.
Mm-hmm.
Park and rec employees are trusted.
Oh.
So they need to be trained to recognize a victim when they see one. The hotel industry in San Diego has been very cognizant of this issue. And they try to train their folks too to recognize the conduct. So if they have someone that's being taken to their hotels for the trade, they can recognize and report.
Okay.
Massage parlors are another area where this happens.
Mm-hmm.
So we at the city attorney's office work with our community partners, and we'll go knock on the doors at massage parlors. I've done it myself to make sure that they have the right posters on the wall that tell victims what to do if they believe that they are victims of trafficking.
Mm-hmm.
My next goal is to try to start focusing on the tattoo parlors, because victims are often marked as property of the person who is trafficking them. So if we can train our tattoo artists to look out for certain signs,
Mm-hmm.
they too can report it and help us step in and rescue victims.
So a person, the whatever you call him, he would bring the minor or whoever that's working for him or her into the tattoo parlor and kind of like stamp them, with
and mark them,
kind of like a gang affiliation kind of thing.
You got it.
Interesting. And so other guys know that don't touch this person because that person belongs to me.
Yes.
Is that what it's doing?
I think so.
Wow. Interesting. And so, so tattoo, I mean, I would think tattoo artists would realize if it's some person is coming in with these, minor children all the time getting this tattoo on them, you would think that they would know.
I don't know. So many kids have tattoos nowadays. I'm not sure anybody would think twice about it, but if we can at least raise the issue, we might be able to help.
Yeah, that's good to know. That's good to know for a parent too. If they see a tattoo on their kid, it's like, what's that for? Or because aren't they supposed to have parent permission if you get a tattoo under I don't know, 16 or 18 or something?
I actually don't know the answer to that question. That's a great question. I'm going to have to find out.
I thought you had to have parent permission to have a tattoo if you're underage, if you're a minor or something. So.
Yeah.
I don't know. It's changing times. What do you think is gonna, after we deal with coronavirus and this pandemic, how do you think things are going to change in our community with regards to your office or what difference in crimes? Are there different crimes that you're seeing more now than previously?
No, I don't think that the crimes will change. I think communication will change.
Mm-hmm.
I actually think there's a bright light in any of this. We are learning to be far more efficient. Like maybe we don't have to physically go to so many meetings.
Right.
And I like the idea that perhaps my attorneys can start attending more community meetings virtually instead of trying to get there, because sometimes that's a couple hours in a round trip. So I'm hoping that we'll be increasing visibility for the city and helping us to better serve our communities. Because it's always been so hard. Sometimes I'll bounce around from an evening meeting one to the other, and you do your best, but you're never quite present at one meeting because you're getting ready to move on to the next. But if we could just do what you and I are doing right now, that could really help us.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, like tonight, I've got like 3 Zoom meetings for the community. And, you know, in the past, I would probably maybe go to one, you know, or one and a half of it, you know, because you're trying to get from one to the other and all that. And now, you know, you can record it too. So, you know, and I guess that would help as far as, you know, having to deal with the Brown Act. You could, instead of, you know, giving more access to people, if they can't go there in person, I guess all the meetings can pretty much be recorded, and probably you can participate in person too. I mean, you know, virtually in person if you have a question or something.
I'm hoping that's going to be the way it is. Like for our senior communities, those that don't have buses, it's hard to park down our cars. It's very hard to park downtown, and it can be expensive. So I think it's going to open the access up.
That's good. All right. Well, I think that's about all the questions I had for you. Is there anything you want to add for our University City neighborhood and everybody else?
I would just, well, I appreciate you giving a spotlight to the office, because we have a passion for service. If there is anything I can do to help the community, we have an email that it just says contact us, and we read it and we respond to it. So I am always happy to try to come to, pardon me?
On the website, on your website?
Yes, on the website. You can also call. Yep. And we like to do forums on issues that may be of interest. Every community is so different. All 9 of the districts are so different. We have some elder abuse issues that are extreme in certain communities. We can come to a forum and talk about what to look for, who to report it to, what is legal, what's not legal. So whatever you are experiencing in your community, feel free to ask, and we'd be happy to come and talk to you about that topic and educate you, and then figure out how we might be able to partner.
Okay, that's good. Can you, I don't know if you have the stats right in front of you, but do you know what, in District 1, what seems to be the predominant thing that you have to deal with?
I actually don't know. I was trying to think off the top of my head. I would say what we commonly hear about are a lot of like neighbor upon neighbor disputes, code enforcement, potential code enforcement violations, like maybe somebody didn't get permission to cut a tree down, or they built a fence that's too tall. Those are the things that come to mind immediately.
Okay. All right.
And streets, you know, a lot of people complain about streets, rightfully so. My office does not go out and fix the streets, but we certainly do try to preserve the budget so there's money to fix the streets. But
I will say some of those sidewalks do need some work.
Oh, absolutely. In which case we will defend those lawsuits.
Okay. All right. Well, thanks again. So thanks again to, City Attorney Mara Elliott for joining me today and giving us an insight into what your office is doing and how it runs, basically. And I wrote down your office number if anyone needs to call the office and get some help on anything that we've talked about or anything else. I'm sure you guys can, tell where they need to go to if you guys don't deal with it. And so that phone number I have is 619-236-6220.
That is correct.
Yes. And then once again, this podcast is brought to you by the University City Community Association and made possible through a grant from the County of San Diego. And for more information about UCCA, including membership, to view our monthly newsletter, go to our website at universitycitynews.org. And remember to follow us, UCCA, on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. And thanks again. Have a great day. And remember, University City, more than just a neighborhood.